Hey, welcome back to the Bible Story Podcast. My name is John Drabert. I work at Covenant Bay Bible Camp near Edmonton, Alberta. Now, in just a couple of months, on February 1st, we're going to be opening summer camp registrations. And if you are planning on attending summer camp, I would encourage you to get on this early. Register early so you can reserve your spot, your child's spot, for this coming summer, okay? February 1st, mark that in your calendar, and we'll have a great time in 2024 this summer. Okay, well, if you are new to the Bible Story Podcast, please hit subscribe. Share this with some friends because our aim is to help people grow in a relationship with Jesus. We believe that there is nothing more important than a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. And if you believe that, if you want to help others grow in their faith, sharing this podcast is a great way to do that. We're going to continue now in the parable series, and a parable is just a short story that teaches a principle or a value that is important. You know, Jesus used a lot of parables in his speaking and teaching to the people, and so this is one of his parables that he used to teach. Now, last week we looked at the farmer sowing seeds on various different types of grounds, a path, a rocky ground, thorny ground or filled with weeds, and then good soil. And we looked at how different types of soils produce different types of harvest or fruit. Now this week we're looking at a parable about two sons. Okay, it's often called the prodigal son, but I prefer calling it the parable about the two sons because both sons teach us something very important about the type of heart that God wants us to have towards Him. So let's get into this story, okay? So Jesus was talking about two sons, and the younger son asked his dad for his inheritance early. Now you can imagine how offensive this would have been. You typically don't ask for your inheritance early. It's kind of a rude thing to do, right? People pass away and they leave an inheritance. Well, this son was so bold that he asked his dad for his inheritance early. And his dad, well, he obliged. He gave him his inheritance. And so the young man or this younger son took his inheritance, took the money, and he left home. And he went to this faraway, distant land, and he lived it up. He lived a wild and crazy life. He partied hard. He did some things that he knew wasn't right. His moral compass was being disregarded. He threw that away and he just lived however he wanted to live. Well, eventually the money ran out and he was in a pretty bad way. He was hungry. He didn't have enough food. So he goes to work for a farmer. And this farmer has him feeding the pigs. And he is so hungry at this point that he looks at what the pigs are eating and he says, I could eat that. That looks good to me. I am so hungry. And then he comes to his senses. He comes to his senses and he says, what am I thinking? All the servants, all the hired workers my dad has, they have more than enough to eat. And I'm here starving, feeding pigs, thinking that this food that I'm feeding these pigs is good enough for me. This is crazy. And so he makes plans to go home and beg his father to forgive him. Well, he gets home, and while he was still a long ways off, his dad sees him and comes running out to him. He throws his arms around the younger son and he welcomes him home. He throws this big party and everybody is celebrating with feasting and laughter and joy that his son was lost and now is found. Except for the older son, the older brother, who hasn't yet joined the party. And so his dad goes out and looks for this older son, and he's like, what are you doing? Like, your brother has come home, my son has arrived home, it's a time to celebrate. Come join us. And the older son looks at his dad. He says, "Dad, I have worked for you for all of these years, and you've not once given me a animal to have a dinner party with my friends. And yet, when this young son of yours, my younger brother, comes home after wasting all of your money, you throw him a big party. You welcome him home like nothing has ever happened. You've never celebrated me like this. Like, what's the deal? This isn't right." And so his dad explains to him, "Son, your brother, your younger brother, was lost, but now he's found. We had to celebrate. He's come home." And then he goes on to say, "Everything that I have is yours." And with that, the story ends. So this story is a really great story and illustrates some really important things. And I'm going to highlight a couple of them, but first of all, the father in this story represents God and the desire he has for a relationship with each of us. Now, the two sons represent different types of people who are in relationship with God. And maybe you are a little bit like the younger son who's wanting to rebel, wanting to live like the world lives and party hard and not have much regard for his relationship with his father or God. Or maybe you're like the older brother and you've been faithfully, diligently serving and working for your father all of these years, and yet there's a bit of bitterness. You think, for whatever reason, that he doesn't appreciate you, that he doesn't love you, that he doesn't accept you in the same way that he has accepted the younger son. What kind of person are you? Are you more like the younger brother? Or are you more like the older brother? More rebellious? Or maybe more bitter? Regardless, the younger son was far and distant from the father, from God. And the father wanted nothing more than his son to come home and be close to him in his heart. And he wants the same for the older son. The older son maybe was physically there, but his heart was distant. It was far. Both sons were distant and far from God. Which son are you more like? You can find this story in Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. In fact, it would be a great thing for you to do is just read this story for yourself. Read it a few times and see what phrases and what things stand out to you and reflect on them. Let me finish with the words that the father says to the older son. He says this, "Look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found." All right, let's get into some questions. Now, I would like you, if you're not listening with this with a friend, then I would like you to share it with a friend so that you can discuss these questions with them. It's one thing to reflect on these questions, and that's good, but it's way more beneficial for you to be growing with a friend, a family member, and discussing these things together, okay? So the first question is this: how do you judge your own heart? Now, that might sound a little bit crazy, but we often don't look at the actions that we take. We judge other people by their actions and their words, but we judge our own selves, our own hearts, by different criteria. Maybe it's our motivations, maybe it's our inner thoughts, maybe it is the things that we intend to do or not do. So how do you judge your own heart? And is it a fair judgment? Hit pause and share. In this story, there are two sons, the younger, rebellious son and the older, bitter son. Both of them had their hearts far from the father. Which son do you relate more to? Hit pause and share. Our final question is this: describe the kind of relationship you want with God. Hit pause and discuss. Hey, thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode. I enjoy hanging out with you and spending time with you. So thank you. Next week, we're going to look at the final episode in the parable series, which is the parable about the Good Samaritan. So tune into that next week. Hey, I am praying for you. Make sure you connect with each other throughout this week and encourage one another. In fact, it would be a great idea for you to jot down some prayer requests of your friends and be praying for your friends throughout this week. We'll talk to you next time.